Okay, brilliant. So we're live. Awkward sitting around for a couple of seconds. We'll give it a couple of seconds and we'll make a start. Yeah, okay, great. So, yeah, the last one we did of these was in July. So it's quite nice to be able to record one of these again for you. Before we make a start, I'll just kind of remind you of the process and how all of this works. My name is Rob. Welcome to the Tumble Hub, and this is a Tumble Tune-Up. The way a Tumble Tune-Up works is a couple of days before I record, I'll send out a message and say, hey, what's your tumble headaches? What can I help you with? And then people respond to those on Instagram usually, and then take some notes down, look at what the key standouts are for that month, and then I'll just put together a couple of things that will hopefully cover those questions. Now, if you're here and it's your first time, I'd be really grateful if you could like and subscribe. It helps the channel grow, and you know, it's nice to be able to meet and communicate with new people and build the Tumble Hub community. If you're here and you're back, thank you for being here. And thank you for helping me to be able to build something like the Tumble Hub. I'm really grateful. My dogs are walking around, so sorry if you hear those. I will try to make sure that they aren't disturbing us too much. But yeah, like I said, it's the first one since July. It's the first one of the 25-26 season. So I hope your seasons have started well. I hope you're hitting the ground running, and I hope that your teams are looking strong and ready for a really competitive year, and that your tumble elements are going from strength to strength. So we'll make a start. One of the questions I got a lot about was just about arms in general. So I've got a couple of specific questions about arms, but I thought I'd just jump in with some changes I've been making with arms this season with my own athletes, but then also with clinics that I've been attending for other teams up and around the country, and also at conferences that I've been speaking at. So arms and what to do with them. I think we sleep on them a little bit. I don't think we always give them the focus that they deserve, and I think that can be specifically seen with the way that we might do something like handstand hops and do it as part of our training, but then maybe not actually do anything else with it, or getting athletes to think about what the idea behind that is. So we'll start there, I think. The change that I've been making is that everything is blades out. All right, so the way that the athletes are tumbling is that they have their blades facing out. So if they're setting for a back walk over, their arms will be up here by their ears. And even if they're swinging, they're bringing their arms up this way. And then when they reach into their round off, they're reaching this way into their round off with their blades facing out, as opposed to their hands just facing forwards. And the reason why I've made that adjustment is because when the hands are facing forward, let's just use this as a round off, just because I'm limited to space here. When an athlete is reaching forward for their round off, now assume that the athlete's arms are by their ears. As they're reaching forward and their arms are facing forward towards the floor, as they get there, their hands start to move slowly further apart. Now, what that means is they're in a weaker position and the block is going to be poor. And we don't need that. We don't want that. So one of the adjustments that I've made is I've had the athletes come in nice and strong with their blades facing out. All right, now what that means is by the time they get to the floor, their hands are sort of facing more like a diamond shape. Trying to get that on the camera is really disorientating. But they're creating more of a diamond shape, which means that everything is following a nice line right through their arms, into their shoulders, into their spine, into their hips, where they can create maximum power. When the hands are further apart, it just kind of pushes away from the floor as opposed to pushing through the floor. So everything that I've been doing this season so far has been really geared towards how close can I keep the arms to the athlete's head, shoulders, ears, but also how can I create maximum power? And creating maximum power for me has been by making the blades face out. And that has also helped me in things like walkovers, athletes being stronger in the handstand. It's also helped me in things like back handsprings, athletes being stronger in the block. You know, all of these things are better because of the way that the blades are facing. So that's the general adjustment. And I would highly recommend it. And I am going to make a video about it as well, because or a longer video in a gym with some drills and things, because I think you can really see the difference between how athletes look when they are doing it that way. And then hopefully that'll help you create a bit more power when you're doing things like round-offs and back handsprings. One of the questions I also got was about bent arms, and that's bent arms in back handsprings. And I feel like that's pretty timeless. And I feel like that's something that goes on for all of us all of the time. And it can be a number of reasons. It can be things like flexibility. So if your athlete isn't flexible enough, you might find the arms are stopping at the shoulders, which can be really frustrating. But then you also might find that the athlete just isn't fast enough. So the question that I got specifically was about an athlete can do it really well on a trampoline or a track, but then when they get to the floor, their arms start to bend again. Well, okay. First off, there's a really massive difference between going from a trampoline to a floor. There's going to be some anxiety there. There's going to be a lack of confidence and all those types of things. So you're going to have to coach that, but then you're also going to want to be coaching what the athlete is doing at specific shapes, because you've got to remember that the trampoline is going to be doing a lot of the work for them. So the bent arms might not actually be because they're not flexible. It might not actually be because their arms aren't fast enough. It's likely, but it's probably not the key reasons. The key reason more likely might be is that when they hit their arch, they're not lifting their toes into the handstand, which will give them a nice, powerful snap down. So when you're looking at a back handspring that's performing on the floor for a first time, the bent arms might not be just because of a lack of flexibility or a lack of speed. It might be because the athlete, as they jump into their back handspring, they're not lifting their hips, which means they can't guide their toes over into eventually what becomes their snap down. So I guess what I'm trying to say is don't just assume that the arms are the problem, because it might not be that the arms are the problem. It might more be so that they're not lifting their feet up into their handstand fast enough, which means everything else just kind of crumples because they buckle. However, if you've watched it back and you really do think it is the arms that's the problem, have a look at whether they are fast enough, but then also maybe look at whether you could play with their hands a little bit and go blades out. Because like I said, blades out will create a little bit more power for you when you're actually being able to hold your weight. Okay, so we've got blades out and bent arms. I've got a question about spinning and what is the correct way. This person asked specifically about the spinning out of a round off. So we're talking about round off falls. In an ideal world, it would be a round off back handspring fall. I wouldn't necessarily recommend going round off fall unless you're looking at some sort of combination pass where you're going round off fall, back handspring fall or something like that. So if you can, teach your athlete to do their round off their fall twist out of the back handspring. However, regardless of which way they are, whether they're doing it out of a round off or a back handspring, realistically, you want them to spin to the leg that they lunge with. All right. So if an athlete is a left leg lunger, really you want them to be a left leg spinner. A left fall spinner. Now, out of a back handspring, it won't matter as much because they're coming out of a back handspring. However, if you are looking to do a combination pass eventually, like a round off full whip fall or something like that, for the athlete to be able to spin comfortably out of their round off, they need to be able to have that continuous movement, and that continuous movement is only going to come with stepping or spinning to the leg that they step with. How it can be done the other way, but then you're almost counteracting your own spin and that your own exit of a round off, which is really hard. So I would definitely recommend spinning to the same leg that you lunge with. The other things, if you're teaching lunges for the first time to an athlete, you really want to make sure that they're spinning on the way down. If they're not spinning on the way down and they're spinning on the way up, then you could potentially have a lot of problems with the landing, being able to spot the floor on the way down, which is super important, because if the athlete can't see the floor, they can't see the landing, which can be dangerous, but also can leave the athlete disorientated. And then in the longer term, it will also make it really difficult for an athlete to be able to do a double because they've already taken up so much time by spinning on the way up. And if they spin on the way up, everything is slower, right? Spinning for the single on the way down makes the full twist super fast. And then generally speaking, for a double, you'd want the athlete to set and start to lift to at least a quarter rotation before they initiate the first quarter, and then follow it with the 1 3/4. So you definitely don't want the athlete spinning off the floor. And if you're someone who isn't really comfortable with spotting a full twist, for example, then I would definitely recommend not doing that. But then also I would teach, my go-to for teaching full twist is like using a clock. So if an athlete lands at 12 o'clock, depending on which way they spin, they'll just work their way around a clock and then wrap from 6 to complete rotation. So if they spin to their right, they'll land at 12 o'clock, but then on the way down from the layout, you just teach them to turn a little bit more each time, so that they're gradually building up to a fall, but then they feel in complete control of that fall. So that would be something I would consider when you're doing your spinning and your full twists. Another question I got was about landing the punch front safely. I love teaching forward tumble. It's one of my favorite things to teach, but it's one of those ones that you always end up teaching last, because when you teach a clinic, you start with standing tumble because it's generally the hardest and most tiring, going into running tumble, and then you finish with forwards tumble when everyone's finished or they're tired. So I do like teaching punch fronts or just forward tumbling in general. One of the things I would say to land a punch front safely is to make sure you're spotting the floor. A lot of athletes don't really think about that enough. And I've mentioned that a couple of times today already, but a lot of athletes don't really think about that enough. They'll rotate and they'll just look for a landing, but they don't really know when the floor is coming. So what are we looking for in that landing? We're looking for a controlled, cushioned landing. So the athlete should be able to see the floor, and they should almost be able to see their feet as well. So they're landing in almost like an athletic position, balls of the feet, legs slightly bent, but not overdone, but just enough where they can cushion their impact on the floor. And as I say, if they can frame the feet and the floor together, then I would say that's a pretty good landing. And if they need to rebound out of that, they can. In terms of preparing for that, or in terms of how to be ready to try that, you can try a couple of things before you get them to go dead onto the floor. Generally speaking, if I'm teaching the landing element of a punch front, I'll get the athlete to kind of do like a forward roll onto a top tumbler. So it's sideways, so it's stable, forward roll onto a top tumbler, and learn how to spot the floor as they hit the mat that's on the other side. And you can add like a little bounce front tuck onto that as well, so they can actually land onto their back and roll onto their feet if you want to increase the element of that. But generally speaking, if you can get them over a top tumbler and spotting the floor and their feet at the same time, and it will teach them the timing of when to open out, because a lot of the time athletes open too early and they end up over bending their legs, landing on their bums, or landing with which in an even worse situation, landing with straight legs. So I would definitely start with that, and then moving on from there, going on a leap, a springboard or something like that, so you can over rotate and land onto a mat. And then you can gradually take away the springboard and put them on the floor. But in terms of the step out, which is where things can become a little bit more tricky and a little bit more high risk, because if they open out too early and they're trying to step out, that's how we get those horrible knee injuries where the athlete kind of bends their straight leg back. Is the main thing is you're looking for an over rotation. So you're looking for an athlete to over rotate into their step out. If they're landing standing upright or leaning back, we're going to get that horrible that leg angle, and we want them to be able to over rotate into a step out. So what I do first is I get them to do like a springboard exercise where they do a step punch front off of like a springboard or a trampoline and then over rotate onto some mats. That way they know what a real over rotation feels like, and they can see literally the floor coming up to meet their faces. With that, then once they've got that and they're over rotating and they're looking quite comfortable, I want them to step back to step forward. That's what I'm looking for. I want them to be able to step back to step forward. So you can go back to the top tumbler there, forward roll over, step back into their lunge. They've got a nice lunge, the front leg is bent, and then make them front walk over out of that. Always front walk over. If you've got the timing then for the step out and the front walk over a top tumbler, that's when I take them back to a springboard or a trampoline, so that they can practice that over rotation step out onto a mat and in the front walkover. I want them to do the front walkover because I know then they're always going to reach into the skill that follows, right? Round offs, people can have the tendency to drop their arms, whereas if we get into front walkover, then they can really reach into the next skill, which will make the needle kick more powerful, which will make the round off that eventually follows it more powerful, so they can do combination skills as well. So yeah, in terms of the step out, still want them to be able to spot the floor. So as they're over rotating, they should be able to see the floor. Then they can step back to step forward, arms up by the ears, blades out, front walkover, and then gradually you turn that into a round off. But you're looking really for how powerful is the needle kick in that combination skill, so that you know that they are strong enough to add the sequence of skills that would follow that. But I think that's everything. I don't think I've had any questions come through. I'm still working out how to use YouTube live, so hopefully I haven't missed any questions. If I have, I apologise, and I'll answer them in the comments. But yes, this is what we've covered today. We've looked at arms. I would definitely recommend blades out. It just makes athletes overall more stronger. When spinning, what is the correct way? Always spin to the leg that you lunge with, even if you're coming out of a back handspring, because it will make more elite combination skills easier later. Landing a punch front safely, make sure you're spotting the floor, and use a top tumbler to begin with if you're landing your punch front, but then also return to the top tumbler when you're learning the timing, because you're looking for an over rotation where you step back to step forward. That will give you a nice cushioned landing, avoid the dodgy leg angles, but also give you a nice long reach into the front walkover or the round off that will follow. Other than that, hope it was useful. If you get to the end of the video and you're still here, please like, please subscribe. And if there's any questions that you do have, please feel free to drop them in the comment box below. And thank you for watching.